6 years later, in the Korean War, jet fighters did clash in air combat. Many of the American pilots were veterans of World War II, well-trained and battle-hardened. Their principal weapon was the newly introduced F-86 Sabre. In it, they achieved almost undisputed dominance of the skies over Korea. By the end of the war, Sabres had claimed nearly 800 enemy aircraft destroyed for the loss of 78 of their own.
The transition from piston-driven, propeller-driven aircraft to jet-propelled aircraft was not as dramatic a change as one might imagine. Flying at altitude to conserve fuel was a change. The speeds weren't all that violent, because speed is relative. If he's going 600, you're going 600, what's the difference? Zero. I was in the first fighter group that had the first 35 production models of the F-86A-1. We wrecked over 20 of them. It wasn't all our fault. They just weren't built well. There was a new step forward. Pieces kept flying off. Engines quit. Tails would go fluttering. It was really a wild ride. It was very seldom that you took off without landing under emergency conditions.
The opposition was principally the Chinese, with some Soviet volunteers. The communist pilots were no match in skill and experience for their American and Allied opponents. But their aircraft, the Soviet-built MiG-15, was a revelation. An excellent fighter, powered, ironically, by an engine based on a Rolls-Royce design. It outperformed all the American fighters except the Sabre, and in some features was superior to that as well. Its appearance sent a shock wave through the West. The scene was set for history's first jet fighter combats.
We took the fourth group over first, which were F-86s out of Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. It was wintertime, it's terribly cold in Korea, and you couldn't get the damn thing started.
Tiger 2 here, got a couple bogeys out there, one coming around at 2 level.
So we finally worked out, but we flew under very difficult conditions.
The 86 was a good dogfight machine. It was like a P-51, but it was much faster. Good visibility, rugged, reliable. The later models didn't fly apart. The time span between the two wars was not great enough for us to have lost the knowledge that had been gained.
Go ahead, take it, I'll cover you. All right, I'm going in now.
The MiG pilots make the same mistakes that the Germans used to make, and that is head for the deck. And, we could out-accelerate them in the F-86s. But the MiG-15 could out-climb the F-86. It was a lot of airplane. At first, you stand back and shoot, and you could knock them down. The MiG was a very tough airplane. See, the metals had gotten stronger because the speeds of the airplanes had increased. So then they finally got some heavier guns in the 86s and started getting the victories.
I'm going in now. Okay, he's down where you got him to.
The Russians, like America and her allies, used Korea as a proving ground, where their pilots could gain experience of the new shape of aerial warfare. The use of air power in Korea stimulated a highly comprehensive program of technical innovation and aircraft development between the superpowers. The MiG-15 jet fighter fathered a whole family of MiGs, each one more sophisticated than the last, equal and sometimes superior to the performance of the new fighter planes of the West. Before long, the Soviet Union had one of the biggest and most up-to-date air forces in the world, and supplied a host of nations with its aircraft. Since Korea, pilots of the superpowers have never again met in combat. But the Cold War that followed created a different kind of confrontation between the air forces of the two opposing alliances. These days, tension has eased between the superpowers. So this confrontation between the Soviet bomber and RAF Tornado ends with a friendly wave. Elsewhere, fighters have had bloodier battles. June the 5th, 1967. Around 300 Israeli aircraft, mainly French-built fighter bombers, prepared to launch the most decisive airstrike in history. Their target, the air forces of Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. However sweet the victory, for the pilots it remains an impersonal experience.
Only thing that you hear is a lot of noise that comes from your earphones, the commanding of the whole controlling net that are in the air. You don't hear the shooting. Maybe you can hear your shooting, your strafing of your cannon, but you don't hear the hits. You don't hear the shouts. You don't see the face and you don't see the blood of the enemy in front of you.
In just 2 days, the air war is over. In a few devastating hours, the Israelis have disabled all but one of the Arab airfields, destroying 393 aircraft on the ground and shooting down 23. With total command of the skies, Israeli fighters can now give tactical support to their soldiers as they advance across the desert. Then, in another annihilating strike, they catch the Egyptian army in the Mitla Pass and leave it in ruins.
I flew over it. It was very sad. Looking down and seeing remains of burnt out vehicles, thousands, literally thousands of vehicles that were not going to go anywhere anymore. It looked like an enormous scrapyard.
In all its years of combat, it is the jet fighter's most impressive victory. In Vietnam, the air war was very different.
Okay, we got you inside. Okay, keep me inside and I'll go up here and I'll mark the target.
Here, the United States was up against a guerrilla army, concealed in the Vietnamese jungles, hard to find and harder to hurt.
Roger. Looks pretty good. I'd like you to keep your fast as steep as possible and
The main role for the fighters was ground attack, launching air strikes against enemy positions. The American fighters were fast, electronically sophisticated, and delivered a formidable punch. But they were not designed to fight a guerrilla war.
turning south there.
When fighters attacked targets in the north, they met a more conventional enemy, North Vietnamese MiGs.
You only had missiles, so you had to maneuver to get yourself into missile firing position. No snap shooting. Fast, slashing, quick action, and then gone. Their pilots, damn good. Very good. They were very aggressive. They knew what they were doing. They flew with good discipline. I have great respect for them.
Most versatile of the American fighters was the Phantom. It was the workhorse of Navy and Air Force, equally good at air combat or on a bombing run.
The Smoking Thunderhawk F4 is one of the finest airplanes in the world. You know, an airplane is like your wife. She has her good points, her bad points. You love the good ones and you learn to live with the bad ones. The F4 has got a lot of good points. And if I had my choice of flying a MiG-17, a MiG-19, or a MiG-21, I would rather fly the Phantom. She has 17,900 pounds of thrust per engine. Very reliable. It turns like a truck. She won't outturn a MiG, but you know the good points of your weapon system, that it outperforms and outclimbs the enemy. So you go vertical. Now, he can't go vertical with you.
I would have to say that the missile was the most frightening aspect. Flak is flak. They had more flak than the Germans had. It was deadlier. It was radar guided. It shot down more people than the missiles did. But there's something terribly personally impersonal about being the target of an oncoming SAM missile. You know exactly how a fish feels in a barrel. That thing is coming at you. It means to kill you.
The first thing that you see is a large cloud of dust. And then there's some fire, there's some smoke, and you see a large projectile blasting out of it, just like a rocket launch. And then you determine who it's going for. It makes you feel a little better if it's going for one of your buddies. However, if it's coming for you, it doesn't make you feel so good, but it does rearrange your priorities.
The missile, quite frankly, was terrifying. Washington gauged the success of the missile upon those fired versus those that hit us, never appreciating that the percentage of those fired that missed was very high because we were desperately avoiding being killed, sometimes to the detriment of mission accomplishment. But more often, we did it with great skill and cunning and managed to complete the mission regardless. But when you've been shot at by 24 of those things in about a 3-minute period, as my flight and I were on one occasion, you find yourself right down on the deck, which is no place to be over North Vietnam.